Let's start. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our Data+Women Zurich event. Today we have the pleasure to have Julie, aka Data Citron, with us. So we will have like a very quick agenda, some introduction, and then we will have like a Julie presentation, and then we will have like a little bit more time than for the Q&A. So please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A section to ask any question that comes to your mind. So Data+Women is a global initiative. So we have different chapters around the globe. And the idea is really to promote women working in data and to create a safe space to learn and network. And everyone is always welcome to our event. So I don't know how many men we have today. Just, yeah. So we always have to, always love to have, people. And so, yeah. So the team is very short. Huh? It's like Natalie and myself. We have like a very short introduction. I'm currently available for hire. I have the chance to be a Tableau visionary and a Tableau ambassador. My passion in life are like a Tableau, enablement, cooking, walking in the forest, collecting mushroom, which is a good period of the year to do so, and also traveling. I have a blog and a Twitter account, and you can scan my QR code to have like some links. And then we have like Natalie. Natalie is a data visualization designer and a trainer freelancer. She is a Tableau ambassador. She has been participating to Iron Bees for several years now. You should check your Tableau public profile. It's very, very cool. And she loves doing Tableau, teaching, and traveling. And familying. I love this new verb. It's spending time with her family. And if you want to connect, you can also scan the QR code. About this event, like it's just time to relax for you, enjoy. The event is being recorded. We will send the material by email or in social media. Please follow us in social media or in LinkedIn and register in Bevy for our next event, so you're always aware of what's coming next. And now we'll let Natalie introduce our guest today. Thank you very much.
Yes, I do that. So today we have Julie as our data muse. She's an independent data and information designer. She's as well creative director of Knitting and Print magazine, and this magazine is completely awesome. I never received one, I never ordered one, but I've seen what it contains inside, and I should. Completely should. She is a former literature teacher and agency art director. She's known online and really well known as a Data Citron. And you can follow her on Instagram, Twitter, and here you can follow her as well and see her work on Behance.net Data Citron. Well, she loves, well, maybe saying too much, but no, this is what I think. So I think she loves a story-driven database with a lot of data humor, a lot of data college, and she has like a touch with the, I would say you won't help me, of course, because this is what I think. Having the old images with playful color on top of it, it gives a lot of contrast in our college, and this is a really, really specific style, and personally, I love it. And she has a lot of other creative data shenanigans. So this is Julie Brunet, and I guess now the floor is yours. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm sure you're going to introduce yourself better than I do. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Julie. I'm really, really glad. Thank you.
Thank you. I think to preserve a little bit my computer, I'm gonna shut off my camera and I will put it back for the Q&A. But I'm still here, obviously. I'm gonna share my screen. Tell me if it works, if you can see it, if it's okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, and if at any time during the presentation there's some issue with the image or the sound or everything, just scream at me and I will try to fix it. So hello everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here tonight and talk about, not really me actually, but about data physicalisation, and more precisely textile data physicalisation. So data physicalisation is a mouthful that only appears in theoretical literature quite late, so only in 2008. But just as the term data visualization only appears in the 70s, their manifestation date from much, much earlier. In a very large sense, any piece, I'm sorry, any piece of clothing or fabric can be considered as a form of data physicalization because of all the data it necessarily encodes. So for instance, wearing blue in France during the 17th century means you're of royalty. Wearing formal white in a ceremony means you're the happy bride in Western culture, whereas it means that you're probably the mourning widow in Asian culture. And it's quite crazy just to think about the millions of people who died throughout history just to hoist a piece of colored cloth on a hill, and the meaning behind that colored cloth. And there's really no need to run to another story store to buy a piece of the famous Georgia Lupi collection to wear data, as anything we wear, from its material, cheap polyester versus 100% organic cotton, from its color, normcore navy versus, sorry, last fashionable tone, or even state, pristine versus covered in cat hair, carried an entire data set about our social status, or age and gender, or country of living, or habits, and even other member of our household. And I don't have my camera, but I would just take a sip of water. So although it's a fascinating subject on its own, we will limit our shell of selves today to the very strict and rigid sense of textile data physicalization, meaning physical objects made from fiber or needlecraft in order to store and convey information thanks to an encoding system nested in the physical attributes specific to those crafts. And you would think that there is something a bit counterintuitive to marry data and textile making. As Jordan Cunliffe says in her book, which is quite amazing, Record, Map, Capture in Textile Art Data Visualization, Cloth and Stitch, the pairing of a fast-paced and ever-changing domain with such a traditional and laborious skill is not without friction. She said, there's an irony that the data might have changed by the time the stitching is complete. But if we look closer past this kind of superficial contradiction, we see that data and fabric actually shares a lot in common. I would say that both emerge from a raw, basic, canonical structure of crossing vertical and horizontal lines. So we call them rows and columns in a dataset, and we call them warp and weft in a fabric. So Canva is basically a blank spreadsheet waiting to be filled with thread. There's also a long history of fabric needlecraft used as a prime medium to store and convey information. There's a lot, but for instance, we can quote quipus. Quipus were a recording-keeping device found in various cultures in the central Andes of South America. And they encode information through a system of color-noted cords attached to each other in a particular order, or stemming one from another in a tree-like hierarchy. And one quipu could be made from over 1,000 chords. And actually, searchers nowadays still struggle to decipher them. And closer in time, we have the example, the story of the cryptic quilts used as signal for slaves in the Underground Railroad in the 18th century North America. Though their existence and use is still disputed by a number of historians, the belief is that quilts hanging on display in certain houses on the paths of the Underground Railroad were used to communicate useful information to freedom seekers. And they would use traditional quilting pattern, traditional blocks, like the log cabin block, for instance, could signal a safe house, or the flying geese block would point at a direction to follow. Though many historians doubt their existence because they don't really appear in testimony from that time. But I think there's something really appealing in the idea of the traditional, in a sense, bed cover turned into some kind of subversive, resistant flag hung at the window. And a similar but attested story is one of Major Alexis Kasdagali, a British officer captured by the Nazis during World War II. And he spent years in prison doing embroidery with scrap materials he could find in order to keep him occupied and sane. And his captors were actually very appreciative of his skill. They let him teach it to some other prison, but most of all, they hang his creation on the prison wall. And apparently they failed to notice the unusual border that I tried to zoom, despite the quality of the picture, I'm sorry. So the unusual borders made from shorter and longer stitches that were actually mottos in Morse code that Kasdagali hid in his sampler that reads, God save the king, or even fuck Hitler. Approximately at the same period, during the First and Second World Wars, actually knitting spies were a thing, recording data such as train movement, for instance, in yarn through knots. Phyllis Latour Doyle, a British secret agent, received the Légion d'honneur, so the French highest military decoration, in 2014 for the service she spent in France during the war. She was parachuted into occupied Normandy in 1944 to gather intel she encoded and transmitted through a piece of silk hidden in her innocent-looking stack of yarn balls. And she successfully sent over 100 secret messages this way, which helped the Allied forces to prepare for the Normandy landing on D-Day. In the meantime, during the whole war, the Office of Censorship banned actually knitting patterns from international posts because they fear that they were used to transmit secret messages. As back then, knitting patterns were written in some kind of short lines of code, and you would imagine the effort it would take for the British government to check if a sent pattern was a traitorous message or just the instruction to knit socks. And I think there is something quite exquisite in this story and the subversion they show of traditional female craft to convey seditious messages or fight against oppression. Needlecraft has always been frowned upon as a meaningless hobby for the weaker sex, designed to occupy their hands and alleviate their feeble minds for more intellectual activities. And I think it's a delicious irony to see them used as an empowering medium. And it's really what the French artist Louise Bourgeois called le pouvoir magique de l'aiguille, the magical power of needle, this sharp instrument that is also, or could be, a healing and empowering tool put in the right hands. And she had in her heart this recurring figure of the spider weaving its web, And I think she was swapping the innocent, well-behaved lady embroidering in silence in front of the fire to the more ominous, powerful figure of a giant spider. But if we were to talk about the common history of data and textile, it's impossible not to talk about the Jacquard loom, a textile machine that can be considered the oldest ancestor of computers. Patented in 1804, the machine invented by French engineer Joseph Jacquard was used to create complex pattern fabrics like damask or brocade. And it works thanks to a chain of punch cards laced together into a continuous sequence. And the use of replaceable punch cards to control a sequence of operation is considered one of the major steps into computing and data entry through a binary code. Binary code here being hold versus no hold. And the Jacquard loom is very likely the inspiration behind the first computing machine designed by Ada Lovelace and Charles Babbage, and the famous IBM card that followed. And if punch cards are now obsolete in computing device, they're still commonly used actually in knitting machines to create patterns. And you can even buy empty cards that you punch yourself to create your very own pattern, which I find very cool. And the very rule-following nature of needlecraft, you know, certain technique you have to follow to create certain stitches, otherwise everything fall apart, is very close to a form of algorithm. And I think you could wonder if knitting and embroidering shouldn't be actually considered as a part of STEM. And because of their metric construction, these crafts are perfect to create physical, non-agglomerated visualization. But as you can imagine, recreating an entire data set in an analog technique obviously takes a lot of time and energy. And there's something so slow-paced and laborious in creating a textile data physicalisation that is not without its physical or emotional toll. For Jordan Cunliffe, who used to work with quite personal data, she said that it allows her to create a real and private connection with her piece. She said, "There is something about the act of stitching a memory that allows me to unravel my thoughts surrounding an event, giving me a deeper understanding of it that is somehow imbued into the fabric." And I like this project, Granddad's Sweater, where she actually embroidered the intersection of her life and her dead grandfather life with one stitch for each of their day and the intersection of both their life. And she actually stitched it into one of her grandfather's sweater that she inherited. But textile data physicalization can also lead to stronger negative emotion, in particular when you work with upsetting data. And in a project, Demand/Prayer, India Johnson stamped the phrase "from plague, deliver us." It's a quote from the Book of Common Prayer that were compiled at the time of the Black Plague. And she actually stamped this phrase each day on a different piece of cloth according to the number of new COVID cases in her county in Iowa that day. And then she stitched them all together as a kind of mural tapestry. And she said, "I work on Demand/Prayer for about 20 hours a week over 18 weeks. I anticipate the project would be a sad one. I didn't expect it to make me shake with anger while I saw it. It's one thing to model case digitally and another to perform a small physical act of labor that acknowledges each person in a dataset." And I found it very interesting to see that even though the data point is encoded in an abstract way in these data physicalizations, for instance, a stitch of a certain color for a person, they're still not as abstract as they would be in a digital visualization, because they've been made by hand, because a human took hours and hours of their life to make these abstract points. I think they don't carry the same weight, and it seems that they gain back their empathic load, at least for their creator, if not for the public. And analog visualization comes indeed with a lot of weights and constraints, financial ones, logistical ones, but most of all physical ones in both senses of the word. You have to work with the law of physics, gravity being the less forgiving one, and you also have to work with your own physicality. I personally find non-agglomerated textile dataphysicalisation to carry heavy weights on the body. And that's how I discovered the importance of ergonomics. When I was working on a project, a dataphysicalisation project called Dream Tides, a tapestry made of the recording of my dream over a year. And because it was made of 1 column, 3 stitches wide for a day, so multiplied by 365, the tapestry ended up being a thin stripe of canvas of several meters long that I couldn't handle well. And so the further I embroidered, the more damaged the first stitches became, and the more my body ached, especially my back and my eyes and my hands. Until I met with a friend's grandma who worked as an ergonomics teacher in art for disabled public. And talking with her, I realized how I need to review my practice in order to keep going. And so I built a special kind of frame in wood with padded tubes at each end from a pillow I destroyed, so I could roll and unroll the tapestry as I progressed, and it helped me greatly. And so in order to make this presentation a little bit less theoretical and a bit more behind the scene, I thought I could end it with sharing with you the dataphysicalisation project I'm currently working on. It's a project that had stop and go now for a shameful amount of years, years plural. So I named it Dripping Lines. And it's a project in collaboration with another data designer called Karim Douyeb, that I hope you know and you follow. So I coerced him some time ago to create a conjoined project in which each of us would create a data object from the same data set, but using very different mediums. And Karim chose pottery because he did that a lot. And I choose, well, needlecraft, obviously. And Karim actually found the data set. So it's a monitoring of sea ice extent and concentration measures from 1979 to the present for the Arctic. And the index system that he created shows with colored square on a 10 by 10 grid for each month of each year, the percentage of ice either above the base average or below the base average. So it's a very simple area-based visualization with 3 different types of data to encode: normal, below, and above. And from the beginning, I know I wanted to have the encoding be only supported by the needlecraft itself. So I knew, for instance, that I didn't want to use color as an attribute, as well, also because, well, ice is pretty white. So I wanted to have an entire white tapestry. And it meant that I would rely only on creating different texture through different type of stitches to translate the data. And I also wanted the stitch to mimic the significance of the data, so that the attributes kind of coincide with the data. So for instance, I wanted to add more on a stitch for the above data point, and I wanted to remove or skip a stitch, so basically creating a hole for the below data point. And my idea was that with this kind of system, you would see the tapestry changing from a dense one to disintegrating one with more and more holes menacing its structure to shreds. And so my first technique of choice was to use a knitting machine. So mainly because with a 10 by 10 grid for a month for 46 years, that's 100 multiplied by 12 multiplied by 46. That means 55,200 stitches ahead of me. And I thought the knitting machine would make this goal much more accessible. And so we started to work on prototype with a dear friend of me who had a knitting machine, actually the very friend whom grandma helped me with the previous project, the Dream Tides. But quickly we ran into a structural issue. Making excess looking stitches with the machine was doable. It was honestly complicated, but you can do it. You could create some kind of bubbles, but creating holes in the piece was a no-no. Gap in the stitches is the worst knitting enemy, as it could unravel the whole piece. So creating those holes meant fighting against the very thing the knitting machine was built against. And after hours and hours of trying, it was obvious it was not a working option. And so I abandoned the project for a time. But as it is usually the case, I eventually came back to it with a new approach. This time I was to use a more traditional hand embroidering technique on a large canvas. And instead of creating a hole, I decided I would just skip one square of the canvas and let the thread hang from the adjacent squares. And this meant that the tapestry would slowly lose its structure with more and more hanging threads according to the data. And the tapestry would look to unravel with this quote unquote dripping lines as the ice melted because of the climate crisis. I choose a big canvas with a low amount of points per inch so that the tapestry would end up being a little bit less than 3 meters long. Because my idea was that when it's finished, I'd be able to hang it from a wall and still have the end dripping on the floor, you know, still mimicking this melting. And so I had to try different types of wool, different type of needles, different type of embroidering. And I eventually settled on a very neutral stitch. So basically weaving, so going over and under the canvas weft to create very basic background where the above and below stitches could stand out. And for the above stitches, I use a technique similar to what is called a French note, which is appropriate, to create a kind of bubble. And for the below stitches, I just left the thread hanging in some kind of careless loop. And remembering the importance of ergonomics, and because I actually rent an actual workshop now, I could invest and have installed a big wooden frame, so kind of a loom to mount the canvas that is actually pretty heavy, and also to attach the pattern that is really long on top of it to follow. And I'm not very far along in the project, but I calculated that I need about 4 hours to embroider a year of the data. So for the 46, probably 47 by the time I'm here, that means approximately a little bit less than 200 hours for the entire data set for the tapestry to be done. And to be honest, I have no idea when I'd be able to finish this project, as data physicalisation are rarely monetized. They're more personal projects that you're able to work on at night when your paid work is done. So, you know, only moonlighting on it. But I still hope to finish this tapestry next year in 2026. So stay tuned, and in the meantime I can only encourage you to do what I will do, which is you know, just keep threading. And thanks.
That was very interesting. Thank you very much, Julie. Really like it. Do you want to stop sharing? Maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
So that's good. We already have a question.
Cool.
So from Julia, and don't hesitate to put any other question to Julie. Julia asks you, Julie, when you are done with this project, what will you do with it?
I will burn them. No. Well, I guess the idea is to find a place to have them shown to the public. It really depends. So, for instance, Dreamtides, it's a very the project, the first one I talked, is a very, very thin and long project. So I wanted to have it mounting on the wall and maybe, you know, doing kind of the whole turn of the room. And as I said, for the dripping lines, I see it hanging from the walls and dripping on the floor. So from the beginning, I kind of imagined them exhibited somewhere, but I can't say that I really do the trying to find a sponsor or something for it before it's actually finished, because like I said, it takes me month and month, so I'd rather do it at the end. But in the idea, I would like to exhibit them, because obviously I don't have the room in my place to just keep them. You know, it's difficult to store. It's meant to be seen. I just don't know how, when, or where.
So we have a question from Barbara. I don't know if you know the answer. I don't. Doesn't Switzerland have a long history with textile?
That's a good question that maybe someone from Switzerland could better answer than me. We French, we had a long history. So we had a very long history of textile production in Lyon, for instance, with a lot of factories. We also have in the eastern part of France, and I don't know if you know, there's a brand of very famous embroidery floss that is actually from that country. And so we invented the jacquard loom, which is very, very, very famous and a huge step in the textile production. And were then also used a lot in England, for instance. I think every country probably have a deep history with textile, because for the longest time, piece of clothing, textile, was one of the most precious commodity you can have. It was like more than gold and everything, and you could go throughout your entire life with just one piece of cloth, for instance, and you would never, never, never throw away clothing. For instance, you would lend it to someone else, to, you know, if you're a rich person, to your servants and everything. And when finally it would be anything more than shreds, you would put it actually in your mattress, you know, and sleep on it. And so I think every population, every country had this very strong relationship with fabric. And it's very different from nowadays, when, you know, mostly of our fabric, it's now manufactured in China, for instance, and we don't have the same relationship to it already. So I don't know if I really answered the question, but I answered, I guess.
When you were doing your presentation, I was thinking, my origin, I was born and raised in France, but my origin is Spanish. So my grandmothers always stitch and did like very beautiful clothes and textile for the table and everything, by doing this technique that is like from Lagartera, which is embroidering, but also creating all that you stitch and that create pattern. So first, when you were speaking about that, I was thinking, she did the same. No.
No, I was trying to create holes with the knitting machine, which was an error because knitting fabric hates holes, and you probably know it if you have a sweater. If there's a hole in it, it's unraveled. It's very difficult to mend. But other embroidery techniques are built again around holes actually, and how you create them and everything, and it's fascinating. And there's hundreds and hundreds of embroidery techniques, and it's really, really interesting.
No, that was very cool. So we had, I don't even have, I have some question for you, but I have the audience like asking questions, which is fantastic for me. So Anne, do you have in mind other example of data physicalization involving textile that you like?
Yeah, so it's a famous one, but I realized I failed to put it in my presentation. But one of the most famous charts in our time, I would say, is the warming stripes, from Ed Hawkins. And it's actually the only chart that have International Day, in the calendar. But this is actually, it has been inspired by some kind of data physicalization called temperature blankets. And so it was existing before, and it's funny because it's the other way around, it started from a data physicalization and then becomes a chart, usually the other way around. And so you have a project called Tapestry, which is funny. So it's a word made from tapestry and temperature. And so it's really beautiful. It's a project when a lot of knitters actually knitted those long scarves that they use as some kind of banners to demonstrate in the streets, and you would see the difference in temperature from different city, for instance, stuff like that. And I know Georgia Lupi worked a lot on patterns, so she did a couple of tapestry that I found really, really nice. I like the work of Jordan Cunliffe, so you can see in her book, or Ian Johnson. I also showed a project. And there's also, I have to find her name back. She's not doing data physicalization, textile data physicalization per se, but it's, I think it's a Bulgarian woman that actually stitches on leaf, leaves she found in the forest and everything. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm really impressed by all the people that are actually doing weaving techniques, so creating their own fabric. That's also quite amazing. It's a niche, but it's a very big niche to explore.
No, I like the way that you said that, like physicalization inspired like the digital data and vice versa. I was sharing the link. I attended like an event like years ago where we had a mathematician speaking about, let's see if I pronounce it correctly, itomezashi, which is a Japanese stitching technique where you can encode almost everything.
That's amazing.
And I really like it. And I say, oh, let's use it to encode the name. So I start like doing in Tableau Public, like how to encode. And then I say, oh, but how it will look like? And I even encoded like, using the technique. So it's very easy. It's like you have a different pattern if it's a 0 or 1.
Yes.
And because the row and column, you do exactly the same, that creates a unique pattern corresponding to your name. So that's always very interesting to see. So we had Julia, who asked about if there is some Faber art group in Switzerland or in Europe, thinking of other platforms for sharing your work. That I don't know, but maybe you do.
I think sometimes the obstacle is if you're doing textile data physicalization, data phys, we can say. So it's an analog technique, right? It creates in the real life. And so if you want to share it online, you can only take pictures and it kind of flatten it. And especially if you have like embroidery technique that leans a lot on texture and depth. And I know, for instance, that when I took the pictures of the dripping lines, everything seemed kind of the same colors, and it was really not the same thing, and that's seeing it with your eyes or even touching it, which I wouldn't really like people to do that because it's white, and also it's a fragile structure by nature because it's showing something that collapses. But it's really not the same thing as just, you know, sending a picture on the internet.
Yeah, you have to see it to be surrounded by it.
Yes,
to really
exactly.
feel it
And see
inside.
the scale, for instance. I love working on big scales. I like this idea of the 3 meters, you know, tapestry, which is not that big for a tapestry actually, but you can, you know, you see it and it's bigger than you, and also you can really see the change in time. You can see the evolution, you know, the trend of everything just falling apart.
Nathalie, do you have a question for host? Because I know I was surprised. Nathalie is a big fan of Louise Bourgeois works.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, and at some point, you know, the art done by women, that can be data physicalisation or also. I don't get it, but it's always bigger, you know. It just uh, it's like you were showing all your heart or what you're building is so big. And if you compare, for example, at the MoMA Museum, I know the subject because I did some visualization about it, and so Louise Bourgeois is well, she owned, I don't know how many percent of this MoMA exposition, but quite a lot. But at the end, when I compare the number of women artwork compared to men, of course there were more for men, but at the end, women appear more when in the size of the artwork that were presented. The largest size, they were like on the top 10, there were like 3 or 4 of them. And in the and Louise Bourgeois has a long phrase. I think it's embodied as well. No, is it written? Is it embodied? You know that one?
Yeah,
And
she
it's,
did a
I
lot
don't know,
of
7 meter, something like this.
yeah.
And this spider, she's so big as well. It's just like, well, we need to do things bigger or what? Well,
Maybe we need to compensate, you know, finding our place in society or something like that. But with textile, you can do both, which is great. As you said, Annabelle, when you were talking about your grandma, you have those tiny, tiny stitches you can do when you do embroidery. It's very, very small and it's meticulous and it's really interesting in itself. And at the same time, you can have really big structure. It really depends. And in all those visualization, actually, you know, as I said, it's usually non-agglomerated visualization. So you decide actually the scale of one stitch, you know, one data point, and then, you know, the bigger the data set, the bigger the piece, obviously. And I think it's also it's impressive to see piecing of clothes that we nowadays are used to see quite small, you know, and see them huge in an entire room, for instance. And obviously it's going to have more impact that way.
Yeah, so on that, I wanted to ask you, okay, you were saying that data physicalisation doesn't weigh the same weight, and you highlighted that the fact that people were taking time to actually do it, and with just what you mentioned, it's meaning, do you think this is the only way of raising awareness, that making things getting a lot of time to do, a lot of big pieces? Or do you think as well that the fact that people can touch, even if you don't want yours to be touched, can bring something different in raising awareness on, like the eyes you were talking about, but that can be something else?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we live in a period with, you know, more and more part of our reality is digital and online. But
Yeah.
I think we still have somehow the mindset of people
craft.
before that. Because, for instance, with Nightingale magazine, you can see like people who's going to be featured in the website. It's not the same thing at all that people that are going to be featured in the magazine. And seeing your work printed, existing in the physical world is nothing comparing to see it on a screen, especially online, because TV is a little bit different. And so I think when you create an object, people don't consider it the same way. Something online is just a little bit more flittery, and something physical has another weight. And with data physicalization, especially when you do them by hand, I think people are forced to see the hours and hours of work and the patience and the obstinity you put, and it makes you pause, for instance. And I don't know if you saw the recent project from Valentina De Filippo that she made on Gaza death. And she actually painted dots for the death of children. And she also did journalism and things like that. And it's very simple. It's just dots for one person. But when you do it on a computer with a software in, like, let's say 5 lines of code and 3 minutes of rendering, it's really nothing compared to the 12 hours she spent alone counting on her fingers the dots, And she said, you can see in her stories on Instagram, really the toll, the physical, the emotional toll that she had because of that experience. It's an experience. It's really something different. And I think it's very true for the creators, but I think the public probably also, catch a glimpse of this difference.
Thank you for your answer. Yes, I think it brings another dimension, the feeling, and that's really interesting to see how we come back to what it was, like a kind of nostalgia. Or...
It's interesting. I think it's probably a search of connections and link, especially when you do knitting, for instance, hasn't changed for centuries. Like nowadays, we use the exact same technique, the exact same tools that we were using 300 years ago, and maybe when you knit, you feel that kind of connection with the other person that did exactly the same thing as you, doing the same gesture over and over again. It's very meditative in a way.
Yeah. Well, I'm really grateful because I learn so much things, especially about the worm stripes, because I saw the digitalization and then going back to the fabric, because after everyone was wearing scarf, everyone was wearing buying a lot of cool stuff around this visualization. So I really thought that was digital, and
it's
thank you for this.
The streets, it's painted on the streets. Soccer players have it on their on their uniforms. It's crazy, this kind of movement with when it went from a data physicalization to a digital chart and back to physicalization, in our world, and it's a funny kind of movement.
And I really like for the last thing I'm gonna not ask you but tell you, I really like the fact that, well, in fact, what in your presentation that you show us really, well, we try to do data visualization, meaning we try to make people see the data, but you highlight something really different. Hid the data. Hide the data into fabrics. So I think, so thank you for this presentation. I really liked it. Thank you. Maybe there is other question from the audience that we can share. Well, you have a lot. I don't know if you can see the chat, but that was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Julie. So cool and creative. Yeah, the creativity is there for sure. A lot of questions about Switzerland that we didn't have the answer.
I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on the matter.
I wanted to talk about that, Julie.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'm reading the book, and the content is amazing, But what is also
The
amazing
cover?
is like the display of it and all this mini visualization that you have created. When I open the book, I say, that's look like Julie works. And I was not mistaken about that. So that was very interesting. I mean, I don't know, some of the projects, that
Yeah, I
sounds
did
like
that, yes.
kind of your work. I don't know if you want to share, just waiting if we had another question, like how you approach this kind of project, because for me it's very, very different from what I used to work with.
Yeah, sure. So I actually met Nadie Bremer in Utrecht, in the Netherlands during, like a meetup in real life, a physicalization meetup, and she was the sweetest. She said that she had this book project, but that she wanted me to make the entire design, and would I be interested? And I was like, obviously. And so we started working, and it was really interesting because she wanted something between like manual, so very approachable and technical, but also very inspirational, maybe like a coffee book feelings and everything. And she also wanted to have some visualization displayed throughout the pages as well. So that's, for instance, what you showed with the end papers. So the papers you have, in the book at the beginning and the end. It's a visualization I created from, the different projects she showcases in the book, because it's like her 10 years retrospective work. And as you said, the content is quite amazing, and it was actually a delight to work with Nadie, because she kind of brings the best of the two worlds. I think she has a scientific mindset, so she's really organized and everything, but at the same time she's really creative. So she also had this understanding, and it was really like working together, and it was quite amazing. So it was an intense and long work, but it was really great. And she actually did a couple of data physicalization as well, not textile ones, I think, but you can see also about that in her book.
Absolutely. I haven't finished it yet. I'm a very slow reader.
Yeah, but it's a very pleasant read, I find, and really so interesting. A lot of behind the scenes, and I think you learn so much from the way she explained all of her work.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we don't have any additional questions,
I think there's a question from Anne wondering if I have heard of data physicalization exhibition. Which is an interesting question. So data visualization and data physicalization exhibition, you have more and more of them, but I would say it's still quite rare. So as you said, Natalie, the MoMA is quite famous for organizing those with Georgia Lupi work, for instance. And otherwise, it would be more like spreaded pieces of data physicalization here and there. I know, for instance, that I create a data physicalization installation with wood and plexi for DataVis events in France. But otherwise, I think it's still kind of rare, and but something that we have to develop, obviously.
Okay, so let's close up this meeting. I thank you very much, Julie, for taking the time to do this amazing presentation. We will post the recording the next days, most probably tomorrow, but I'm not promising anything. And we will meet again in 2026 with another Data Muse. So thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you a lot. Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Bye.
Julie. Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you all.